All right. Well, Dr. Miller, thank you for coming all the way to Spokane to support us. We really appreciate you and NeoLife for sending you. I want to start off by asking you a little bit about yourself. So what's your background? I know that you run the Human Performance Lab at George Washington University, your nutrition and exercise science, more specifically your expertise in metabolism. But how did you get into that? Just if you think back to like when you were my age and then where you're at now, what's been your arc?
Well, I was never really hugely into fitness or nutrition when I was young, when I was a kid. I mean, I never had any like weight problems or anything like that. So it was something that I never really thought about all that much. When I got out of the military and I went to Penn State, I was a mechanic in the military and I wanted to go in and be an engineer. So I started in aerospace engineering when I was an undergraduate.
Oh.
And I didn't really do too well in that. I got weeded out, It was a very difficult major, but I had a friend at the time. I met a guy who was an exercise and sports science major at Penn State, and he was working with the Penn State football program, and he was a strength and conditioning coach. He was interning with them. And I remember that he used to get all this free stuff from the football program.
Okay.
Free shoes, all this swag, free tickets to games on the sidelines. And it was very like sort of glamorous type job. And I said, how do you get all this free stuff? And he goes like, I'm interning with the football program. And I was like, I want to do that. He says, change my major to exercise science. So I really didn't put a whole lot of, it's not like I even knew that was a major. I know that was something you could do. But what I discovered when I started getting into the field was that, and I was always very mechanical and I always liked machines and stuff. But one of the things I realized was that the human body works very much like it's basically a machine. It's just that it adapts, to different stimulus where a machine can't. It's pretty static. So, I was just fascinated, not so much by like sport and competition. I don't really care much about that. It was more how the body adapts to training was really what I was fascinated with. So I ended up interning with the Penn State football program. And then when I got done with my undergrad, I just didn't really, I felt that at the time there was a lot of conflict among universities in the strength and conditioning field about what was the optimal way to train players.
And what era would this be?
This would be mid 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. So, at the time, Penn State trained in a specific way that was very different than many of the other schools trained in. And I thought to myself, well, I didn't feel like I knew enough when I got my undergrad. And I felt like, well, maybe I should go to grad school and maybe I should go somewhere where they do a completely different style of training. So, I ended up going to Texas A&M. I basically I looked up to see what kind of training they do. I never visited the school. I applied to the school, got in. I just drove down there one day and I walked into the weight room and I told the head strength coach my story. And I said, hey, I just want to find a completely different way to train. And you guys train the most different way that I could find. So, let me volunteer here or work here, whatever.
Yeah.
It did. He let me volunteer there.
Very cool.
For about 6 months before they hired me on as a graduate assistant. And then, I ended up doing that for 5 years maybe. But during that time, I sort of got bored with training athletes. And I got more interested in physiological adaptation to space travel. One of my professors was funded by NASA.
Okay. As you're going back to aerospace, but on the field.
So because I've always had this fascination with space. So I ended up, when it came time to finish with my master's, I just switched into a doctoral program and then went and worked in his lab. And we did mostly simulated microgravity studies.
Okay.
Well, so that was, that's sort of how I got involved with adaptation. But then ultimately, I left there. I went and did a postdoc in microbiology at University of Pennsylvania. And then 9/11 happened while I was doing my postdoc.
Okay.
And then everybody wanted to start doing anthrax research and stuff, bioterrorism type stuff, because I was in a microbiology department, which I didn't have any interest in. So then I left and ultimately I ended up at George Washington University where I am now. And our department is in a school of public health.
Okay.
So I sort of had him, and I had never worked with humans before. My research was all done in rats. So
even for the space stuff?
yeah, that was rat research.
Okay.
So
Yeah, interestingly, like some of the studies like Trianon and stuff like that, I know that was some at Texas A&M and also.
yeah, that was a little before my time. Well, it might have been at the same time, and I just didn't know at the time.
It was like late 80s maybe.
Yeah. So, once I got to a school of public health, I sort of had to shift what I was doing and then started working more with humans because they just didn't have the infrastructure to do animal work. And
Okay.
so then I started doing all kinds of different things. I got funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to study like caloric burn and energy expenditure during interactive video games like the Wii and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And kids in inner city schools, IE programs. I did that for a study. I started working with retired NFL players looking at metabolic adaptations and things like that. And then ultimately, while I was there, I started the graduate program in strength and conditioning at GW.
Oh, cool. So you pioneered that.
Run.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And then we ended up opening the weight management and human performance lab, which I was the director. We closed during COVID.
Okay.
So for 6 years, I ran that facility.
Is it reopened now?
No, there's no intention of reopening. COVID pretty much killed it. And so,
Bummer.
yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much the arc. So I've been at GW for 22 years, mostly studying a combination of performance stuff and metabolism and weight management stuff, because I still have master students who want to do performance type research.
Yeah.
So I oversee those projects, but my own personal interests fall more on metabolism, body composition, weight management, and sort of how to do that at both the individual and population levels.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So in all that time, you've been through like a huge shift in, I would say, overall, like thinking about nutrition and training, understanding like, there's the qualitative side, there's the quantitative side. What would you say have been some of the biggest shifts that you've seen in the approach to nutrition, metabolism, and weight management as essentially we've gotten fatter, sicker, and those things have gotten worse for the public health?
Well, I think I always say that if you look at body weight and just look at like the obesity problem, your body weight is if your body weight is the coin, one side of the coin is activity and the other side is diet. Okay. And if you think about energy balance, it boils down to how much are you consuming versus how much are you burning. That's the basis of it, really. And the overwhelming majority of nutrition research doesn't take into account the activity side. And that makes nutrition research, in my mind, I'm trying to think what's a good word, incomplete.
I see. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you think the inverse is true too, where the activity, so the performance side often doesn't take into account the nutrition?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
They're like compartmentalized.
They're compartmentalized. Yeah. But the difference, I think, is, and I don't want to upset any nutritionists, but the difference is you can go through school and get a PhD in nutrition without really a good understanding of exercise.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't go through school and get a PhD in exercise without a good understanding of nutrition.
Yeah, that's very.
You know what I mean? Yeah,
there's a lot more skin in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot more skin in the game. You need to understand fueling. You need to understand how the body, regulates fuels.
And the people that I tend to work with, the guys I tend to work with, like one of the chief motivations is either weight loss or their performance.
Right.
And they want to have better performance. Yeah.
Right. So I think there's been that disconnect in obesity research because too often it doesn't account for activity. And, with activity research, it often doesn't take into account nutrition unless you're doing like self-report and asking people to report that, which has its own, super flawed.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing I think is that obesity research until very recently has sort of focused on single nutrients. Like we would say, okay, fat is the thing that's causing obesity.
Yeah.
Then we would say, okay, no, it's carbohydrates that are causing obesity.
Yeah.
Then you have other people, the insulin camp, that's saying, well, it really doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's how much insulin is circulating around it. And it's caused so much confusion.
Yeah.
So much confusion.
That's when we interview guys coming into our group or even like coming from our podcast, we ask the questions like, what are the things that you would like to get more clarity on? It's always the nutrition because it's such a confusing one.
Yeah.
The fitness guys generally they just need to start moving.
Yeah.
You're getting front and sweaty, then you can fine tune it from there.
Right. And I think that social media has caused far more harm in this as far as confusion goes. Far more confusion than it has solved any problem, is because, you know, you end up with people who say, well, you know, you have to eat carnivore. I've done really great eating carnivore, and they have all these examples and these anecdotal examples.
Yeah.
And it's true. You can get good results doing carnivore, but
if you
can also
protein,
be a vegan and get good results. So you can also do keto and get good results. Yeah. You can also not do any of it.
If you're just going anecdotal, then like you can find good examples in all of them.
Yeah, right. So this is probably why you have people coming in who are confused, because they're looking for the best way to eat.
Yeah.
And if you just go on social media or YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, you can find 10 people telling you the best way to eat, and they're all 10 different ways.
Yeah, you get a Jamaican guy who eats sweet potatoes and watermelon, and he's shredded, and then you get a guy that's carnivore. And, you know,
and he's shredded.
Yeah. And it's like, okay.
All right. Well,
what's my argument?
I think that's the point. The point is if all of these diets can end up getting you the same result, well, how does that happen? And I think this is where the other disconnect is that that's where the physical activity piece comes into play. So, and I think that people don't make the distinction between overall physical activity and exercise, because if you just look at exercise and its effect on weight loss, it's not very effective.
Yeah.
Right. But you really have to look at the total amount of physical activity that somebody does in a day. So for example, if you look at a study came out a few years ago looking at old order Amish, and old order Amish there's several different sort of sects of Amish, and the old order Amish is a sect that they still like plow fields with horses. They don't have any electricity in their house. Okay. You know, they have wood stoves.
Yeah.
Like
so no manual.
Everything is manual.
Yeah.
And if you look at the diets of those people, they consume maybe 4,500 calories a day.
Okay.
4,500.
It's like a lot of animal based.
And it's all saturated fat, you know, pies, cakes, cookies, pancakes with syrup, ice cream. Yeah. You know, they love sweet food. And you look at that diet and you'd think if you were a nutritionist, you'd
4,500 calories, you'd be like, you're doing out of your mind.
Yeah. It's a nightmare. You're eating saturated fat, refined flours, sugars, everything that basically you're told not to eat. But if you look at the obesity rate in that population, the men have an obesity rate of about 4%.
Wow. That's crazy.
Right. And the average American man has an obesity rate of 39% in the US, right? So women have an obesity rate in that population of about 15%.
Okay.
But they've also had on average about 7 children.
Okay. Yeah.
So, you know, and the existence of chronic disease in that population is essentially non-existent. They don't have high blood pressure. They don't have cardiovascular disease. They don't have metabolic disorder. They're not metabolically inflexible. Yet they're eating a diet that by all accounts we would say should put you in the grave. Yeah.
Would you say, like, just to have some nuance to that, their foods are generally things that they're like getting in their local area or sourcing. So they may be as like hyper processed with a bunch of additives and stuff like that.
Right. They don't have any additives.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right. But
it's like they're still eating sugar. They're still eating flour and all these things that you would have on a carnivore diet.
Right. And if you took that diet and gave it to me or you, within weeks, we'd start having pre-diabetes, insulin resistance.
Okay.
It's not because there's additives in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the caloric imbalance. It's the mismatch between the activity and the intake.
Right.
Have you heard about the blue zones?
Yeah.
So if you
they're all over the world.
Right. So if you look at the blue zones, and these are zones where people have very low incidence of chronic disease, and there's a high percentage of them that live to 100.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look at the diets in the blue zones, they're mostly they're basically the complete opposite of the Amish.
Yeah.
They're mostly plant-based. They're relatively low calorie. There's lots of fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
But they have the same outcomes as the Amish, you know? So like if the rate of disease is the same among the Amish as it is in people in the blue zones, and their diets are completely different, then the diet can't really be the factor.
I see. Yeah.
It's the mismatch between the fuel and the activity.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So, and in fact, if the Amish people would eat the blue zone diet, they wouldn't be able to eat enough food to get the calories necessary to drive the activity.
No, that's a really fascinating, that's a missing link that I'll hear people in the carnivore camp, but a lot of them will poo-poo the blue zone. So like, oh, they eat all plant-based, we want the animal-based, and they'll pick these super small populations like Eskimos or like Norwegians,
right.
or the classic example is the caveman, which, who live like 25 years, something like that. Right. So you're like, okay, that's not the ideal that we're striving for. If everybody in the world did that, that wouldn't be the issue. So the key you're saying is the physical activity.
Yeah, I am. No, I'm not saying that physical activity is more important than the diet, because you can obviously eat more calories in an hour than you can burn in an hour.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not realistic. I'm not saying, well, you could eat whatever you want as long as you burn it off, because it's very unlikely that you're going to burn it off. You're certainly not going to do it just by getting on a treadmill.
Yeah.
What we've done as a society is we've systematically engineered activity out of our lives.
Yeah. That's
right.
So we systematically engineered the activity out, and then we've engineered all of these like faux foods in at the same time.
Right. Yeah. And we've created this toxic food environment that the food environment is one that it's by design makes you overconsume calories.
Yeah.
So
if you're eating a traditional diet like a blue zone, they're getting so much fiber and stuff. It's hard for them.
It's hard to do it.
Yeah. And then the same thing with Amish, you're eating all these really satiating whole food versions of, things that have a lot of calories. Right. It's not breaking down in the same way.
No. And it's matching because it's not being stored.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, like I said, the Amish that I'm talking about were Ontario Amish.
Okay.
And, they did, I think the men did on average 18,000 steps a day. The women did 14,000 steps a day. They did 10 hours per week of vigorous activity and about 40 hours.
Yeah, pushing a family member's plow is not easy.
Right. Their daily hours sitting were 3 hours on average sit. Okay. Right. Yeah. But now there's another study done on a sect of Amish in Indiana where they had 100% obesity. They all had cardiovascular disease higher than the American population because they're eating the same diet as the old order Amish.
But they embrace the modern level of sedentary.
Right. They have electricity. They have cell phones. They'll use mechanized farming.
Wow.
So it really shows you that activity is really the thing, the buffer.
Yeah.
That allows you more liberty with your diet. So
the more that's common sense, because in order to make food, 95% of the population or more had to be physically working all day long to produce food. Now, all of a sudden, 150 years ago, we just don't have to do that.
Right. So like you mentioned, you look at people who talk about like the paleo and the carnivore diet, who say, well, if you look at our
we need to eat ancestral. And
if we look at our ancestors,
they were literally like, just try to get to the next food source while they died.
They say, well, we were never designed to eat like 3 meals a day. And, that's just not how we evolved. But then I'm thinking, well, you don't have to go back 10,000 years to find a healthy population.
No, I mean, you go back to
like the 50s.
Yeah, exactly. It was 50 years ago. And then even if you go to the earliest, like let's say the Sumerians or something, they're eating like, 2 fairly rounded meals. They're eating whole grains. So they've already learned farming.
Right, yeah, farming's been around for thousands of years. Yeah. So the notion that we, if we're so intent on going back and eating like our ancestors, why is it not as equally important to go back and be as active as our ancestors?
That's a great point.
Right?
Right.
Like again, you're focusing so much on one side of that coin and just ignoring the other.
Yeah.
No, yeah, okay, go ahead, eat like your ancestors.
Well, to get to your point, it's like if you have that caloric deficit, if you're running that caloric deficit, whether it's plant-based or animal-based, then you're just eating less, of course you're going to get the result. And that you can't just take that and say, hey, that's because we're living like our ancestors. Is like, no, are you active as active as them? I remember there was a study a few years ago, I think I heard it at one of the NeoLife summits, and it was basically that sitting for more than 3 hours a day is worse than smoking. Have you heard that? Or would you say that that's like a fair assessment of if you're that sedentary, then
I don't think it's a fair assessment.
Okay.
I think sitting is certainly not good for you, but I wouldn't say that it's going to cause the same death rates as cancer, that is lung cancer that you get from smoking.
Okay. So
Now I've heard the phrase sitting is the new smoking.
yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Well, and that seems to be a challenge because realistically, we're not going to get the average person, especially if they have a job where they have to commute or something like that,
Right.
but they have a desk job. We're not going to get the average person to not sit more than 3 hours.
Yeah.
So what are some ways that they can maintain that if they can up their physical activity level, or what types of activities should they be able to do to counterbalance that?
Well, I think that there are small ways that you can sort of introduce activity back into your life without it feeling like intentional exercise. Because I do think that like getting on a treadmill and running or walking on a treadmill just for the sake of burning calories, to me, that feels anti-evolutionary. Like we shouldn't be wired to just waste energy for the sake of wasting it.
I see.
That seems like it's going against
The innate design.
your survival. It's a survival instinct. We're wired
Right.
to preserve energy and only use that energy when we have to.
Well, and it kind of just bothers me in the other sense that it's like, it's this technological advancement, a machine that's literally, you stay stationary while we ride a treadmill. It's like, that still isn't normal. Like, how can you how can you entitle onto your regular activity?
Right. It's still not normal. So I think, and think about this, like if I'm sitting on my sofa and I watching TV, I can order food on my phone. I have a robot vacuuming the floor, right? There's a robot out in the yard cutting the grass. And I think that that's only going to get worse because I don't know if you've seen anything like the Tesla robot. These are basically humanoid robots that won't be very long before they're affordable and can be mass produced, and will be basically doing everything from washing your car to cooking your food, right?
Yeah. Well, you sit in your car while you drive through the car wash now.
Right. Yeah. You have self-driving cars. So I think that our dietary influences have sort of plateaued. I don't think the diet's going to get worse.
Yeah.
I think the food manufacturers have already figured out how to hack our reward system with ultra processed foods. And we've come to realize that.
Yeah. That's the big awakening.
So our diets are basically, I think, and between 1980 and 2000, for example, our daily caloric intake increased by about 300 to 400 calories a day.
Wow.
Okay. So I think that that's sort of plateaued, but what hasn't plateaued is the degree to which we can become sedentary based on new technology.
Okay.
So I think now we've sort of peaked that intake side of the coin has sort of been maximized, but the expenditure side of the coin still has a long way to go.
Yeah, which is interesting. You can almost challenge anybody that's like, oh, I'm not active enough or something. Just go and look at the screen time on your phone.
Yeah, right.
There it is, right there. Are you standing while you're looking at your these?
Right. So
if you're standing, you're still sedentary.
Right. And if you think about things like, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but just think about something like an electric toothbrush. You used to have to go like this to brush your teeth.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't seem like a lot.
Yeah.
Now you're just standing there like this. And if you just look around and look at that activity, walking up to your car, if you have like my wife's car, you don't even have to take the key out. You just get near it and the car opens.
Yeah.
You used to have to take a key out, stick the thing in, turn it. Now that doesn't seem like a lot of activity, but everything.
Yeah.
When you sit around and really think about it, activity has been engineered out of everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything. So
when that's the polar opposite of how our bodies were created, they are engineered to move.
Yeah.
Like the human body is a performance machine.
Yeah.
That's engineered to move in all these marvelous ways, which is why we see people like whether they're wrestling or doing all these things in the Olympics. It's like, look at this specimen. It's able to do things that no other animal can do. Right.
Yeah. 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 So I think what has to happen is we have to, and this is very difficult to do, but I think we have to voluntarily engineer it back into our lives. Like I have a snowblower at my house.
Yeah.
I don't use the snowblower. I shovel the snow.
Okay.
Yeah. Now that's hard to get people to do. Like, why are you going to shovel snow when you have a perfectly good snowblower in there?
Right.
So you have to force yourself to do things. You have to force yourself to make things more inconvenient.
Yeah.
My lab at GW, everybody has a standing desk that electrically moves up and down.
Yeah.
Right. Actually, our building at GW, the School of Public Health, was actually engineered in such a way that like the elevators are hidden behind the reception area and the steps are right there when you walk in. So when you have to be looking, you have to try and find the elevators where the steps are just right there.
Okay.
The steps are actually longer so that
They take longer.
It's less efficient. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So the whole thing is designed.
Yeah. And then when you get to the top of the steps, the other flight of steps isn't right there. You have to walk down the hall to get to the other flight of steps to go up. So the building is built in such a way that it forces you subconsciously, you're not thinking about it.
Right.
Like nobody walks in and says, why the hell are the steps here?
Yeah.
Why are these steps are longer? Why do they feel,
No, they're just like, oh, this is,
right. This is how I get upstairs. Right. So I think that those kinds of things have to happen at scale. Now, how that happens, I don't know that is going to happen. That's why I think people have to make choices, to try and put that into their lives.
Voluntary challenges, volunteer.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we focus on with our guys. I will say there's a positive trend right now, particularly among young men, but I see it among young men, young women, young families of, like you were saying, intentionally wiring these things in to where it's difficult to do the sedentary stuff, giving yourselves multiple steps to like turn on technology or multiple steps to like getting on your phone first thing in the morning. So it's like, oh, I can't get on like my phone. I can't do any social media or anything on it until like 8 o'clock in the morning. Yes. That means, I don't have an excuse not to go to the gym first.
Right.
Or go for a walk or do something physical before I'm sedentary. And then on the, like for young men, there's this big drive right now to do hard things because for like, let's say Gen Z, most of their life was like they were raised on tablets. Most of their life was in this world that would have been foreign even to me as a kid.
Yeah.
Right. Like, smart devices, all that kind of stuff. Like we had to be sedentary, we had to be active a lot more. And so like riding bikes around the neighborhood. So these are things that they haven't done. So they're embracing this idea because it's a new thing of being physically active. So that is one good trend that I'm seeing. And like, what are some basic ways you mentioned, like shoveling snow, walking the stairs? That's a default one that I do. We manage some properties and they're on the second floor and the elevator just takes so long. Like I'll be up the stairs, in a quarter of the time that it takes. So me and my sons, we run up and down the stairs every day. So it's really easy when we're out there for me to get, my flights of stairs, my 10 flights of stairs, or having like your room or your office upstairs. What are some like common daily ways that people can engineer to be more active? So let's say like, do you think 10,000 steps a day is a good metric for, if you want to maintain a good body composition, you're doing some strength training, like would you put that as a daily do that people should have?
Well, the more recent evidence on that shows that 7,000 steps is really sort of, because 10,000 steps was just randomly enough. That was arbitrary. It's really 7,000.
Yeah. And you have to be pretty intentional to hit 10,000.
Yeah, you do.
I find it if I'm not like intentionally doing it, I'm hitting around 6 to 7.
Yeah. Right. So, but and if you were eating the standard American diet, the other thing to remember is that 7,000 steps is enough activity to give you the health benefits of activity, but that doesn't translate into weight loss.
Yeah. It doesn't offset the average caloric.
So like that just basically means that you can take somebody that's overweight and this is why exercise is generally not good for weight loss. Usually what exercise does, if you take somebody who's overweight, and this is typically what happens. Let's say I'm gaining weight and one day I walk past the mirror and I'm just like, I'm sick of myself. I just got to do something. So I'm going to start walking 30 minutes a day. Right? Let's just make believe that's what you say.
Yeah.
Or 3 times a week or whatever. I'm slowly gaining weight over time, which means I'm in a caloric surplus, right? I'm slowly gaining over time. So now when I add that activity, usually that activity is just enough to offset the gain.
Yeah. Okay.
So I stop gaining, but I'm not going to start losing.
Yeah.
Because now I'm in caloric balance with the added activity. So I do that for a month and I get on the scale and I'm no different than when I started.
Yeah.
Right. And I say, well, that didn't work and I quit. But the health benefit of that activity in terms of lowering blood pressure and, your risk of cardiovascular disease, all that stuff is improved.
Yeah.
But that's not why people do it.
Right.
Nobody walks by the mirror and says, oh, I bet my blood pressure is terrible. I'm going to go.
Yeah. I bet my exercise, my triglycerides are great.
Yeah. I don't do that. So, the other problem is if you look at the physical activity guidelines, the National Physical Activity Guidelines say 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity per week for health benefits. But to lose weight, it's 250 minutes per week plus a reduced calorie diet.
Yeah.
Right? So
they're working harder. They get to reward themselves less. Yeah.
Yeah. And when people start exercising, they have a tendency to think, oh, I can be more I can have more liberty with what I'm eating because I'm offsetting it, and they're usually not.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a friend that we would go work out. This is like one of my first year in college. And then he would like love to go to McDonald's afterwards. Like, we can't go unless I work out. I'm like, man, dude, you know how many calories you just ate compared to what you just worked? It's pretty.
See, and I think that falsely has led to people to believe exercise doesn't work for weight loss. Right? Because if you just look at the research, it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The exercise that you're giving them is not enough to create a deficit that's big enough to be able to result in those.
Yes, Trump said I can empathize, and maybe empathy is not the right word, but like I can understand the frustration of somebody who's, working a 9 to 5, they got a desk job, they're commuting there and back. And then at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I'm going to go, on the treadmill for an hour. Like, what a miserable existence, right?
Yeah. And you're right about the food exchange. Like one time I thought about this to myself. I thought, all right, how long does it take to fill my gas tank? It took 2 minutes to fill my gas tank. And then I'm thinking to myself, okay, no matter how I drive that vehicle, I'm never going to be able to empty the tank in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
It'll take me days to empty that.
That's a great analogy.
Right. So food is the exact same way. If I eat a 300 calorie donut and it takes me 45 seconds to eat that donut, there's no way.
In 45 minutes, you'd have to be like on an assault bike. Sorry, by saying it's to my dad. Yeah.
So, when you look at food as trading that for minutes of activity, then it sort of puts in perspective. This is one of the reasons why we always used to tell people to track their food.
Yeah.
Tracking your food is a pain in the ass, but there's no better way to learn about what's in your food because people have no idea. There are times when we would talk to clients and we'd be like, how many calories are in a Big Mac?
Yeah.
And some people would say 150 and then other people would say 4,000. There's like just no clue about what's in their food.
That's why I like the like using Chronometer, which is what we do for our body composition guys, because then it's giving them a realistic picture. They're like, oh yeah, you're blowing your fat calories out of the water every day and your carbs are like way up there, but look at your protein.
Yeah.
You got to switch that around.
Yeah.
So that, okay, look, these snacks that you're putting in, sometimes there'll be things that they're not scanning that they don't think are important. I'm like, that's important. You got to add it. Every time you have that latte with extra sugar and stuff, that's a lot of extra calories.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Drinks are especially notorious for people not tracking them.
Yeah.
And not thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like one of my guilty pleasures is I like some really good coffee, but then I'll add a little bit of heavy cream and a little bit of honey to it. But I'm like, that there goes some of my allotment for the day. Like I can't have, that thing that my wife baked in the evening now.
Yeah.
So I have to have that trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. The only reason that we need to think about that is because of our activity levels. Like, could you imagine an Amish person saying, oh, I better watch how much ice cream I put?
That's true. Yeah. Well, I go for like these long bike rides or hikes, or like last weekend, we were active every day.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about how much, and I didn't walk away from that weekend like with extra weight. If anything, I was in better shape because we were active the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's actually not an uncommon response. I mean, we used to work with clients all the time. We'd be so stressed when they'd go on vacation, but they're like, oh, I'm going to be eating everything and doing all this, but they come back and they're either lighter or there's no change.
Are you going to be in Mexico with us in a couple weeks?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir. I didn't get to go last year, but I would have. Yeah, I
went last year.
Okay. Yeah. I was like, we're going to be pretty active the whole time because that's just like me and my wife. That's what we like to do when we have downtime is go do physically active things, swimming and all of that. Okay. So let's talk about activities. What are some of your favorite physical activities? We've talked about, you have a really good presentation on the importance of strength training for weight loss. So let's talk about that first, but then I want to hear like, what are some of your other favorites, like hiking, swimming, things like that. What would you recommend if people were going to like give a good spread? And we like to try to encourage guys not only to do, to not just do strength or endurance, but to do a combination of both. And if you have to focus on one for the bang for their buck, it's strength training.
Yeah.
And then if they need to, if they're trying to work on a little bit of cardio, you can do more intensity with your strength training. You'll get above 120 beats per minute. But what would you say are some of your favorite things, and why is it so important to do strength training in particular to work on your body composition?
Well, one of the things is if we're talking about trying to improve your body composition, one, you really need to be in a caloric deficit.
Okay.
And when you're in a caloric deficit, your protein needs need to be higher because you don't want to start losing muscle.
Okay. Yeah.
And the bigger that deficit is, the more muscle you're going to lose. And the leaner you are, the more muscle you'll lose.
Okay.
So somebody who has a lot of fat to lose can have a much larger deficit without worrying about losing as much muscle.
Okay.
So strength training, it preserves muscle better than aerobic exercise does. The other thing is
is that because like I always hear that it's because the easiest fuel source, if you don't have it, or if you're restricted to mainly like protein and fats, is the glycogen that's found in your muscles. Is that true?
Well, the glycogen that's found in your muscles is always being burned. Like right now we're sitting here, you're burning 60-40 fat to carb.
Okay.
And that's coming from that glycogen. So, as far as that, so the fuel source doesn't really have much to do with it. It's how the body wants to adapt to the exercise. So anytime you do an exercise, the body says to itself, the brain says, how do I make that easier the next time he does it?
Huh.
Right. It's fatigue resistance.
Yeah.
Right. You know, if you shovel snow, you're going to get blisters on your hand.
Yeah.
Right. So
I'm here picking some of my calluses.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like if you lift a lot of weights, you have these calluses here because it rips holes in your hands. And then we want to not do that next time. So we're going to make calluses so that doesn't happen. So if I do a lot of aerobic exercise, let's say I'm going to go out and run and the body says, okay, how can I make that easier next time? The body's it's going to ramp up the mitochondria and the vascularization of the legs so that you can have better blood flow and all that. But it's also going to say, this would be a lot easier if he was lighter.
Yeah.
So if I have a lot of upper body muscle and I'm not using that during running, the body's going to say, well, let's get rid of that tissue. I don't need.
That's a notorious thing. Like for cycling, I remember when I first got into cycling, pretty much all the guys I rode with, they would get these really strong legs. And then up top, I made sure to do push-ups every time before I cycled. And then I also had a pretty high protein intake with the NeoLife shake.
Right.
And so I noticed I didn't lose as much upper body muscle mass.
Right. Now, if you do weight training, the body says, okay, how do I make that easier next time he does?
Which means you want to hold into it.
And then it says, well, let's make the muscle bigger.
Yeah.
Because, if I lift 100 pounds and I can only get it 10 times, the body says, well, the body wants to be fatigue resistant. So it says, how do we resist fatigue the next time he's going to lift that 100 pounds? Well, let's make the muscle bigger.
Yeah. No, that's a really quick way. It's intuitive. It's not just like, oh, if I do it more, my muscles are just growing reactively. No, the body's actually being proactive.
Right. The body's being proactive. So muscle is the metabolic engine that burns calories. So you don't want to lose it. And the other thing is there's evidence from starvation experiments. Like there was a famous one, the Minnesota starvation experiment. Anybody can look it up, but the bigger your deficit is and the longer you're in a caloric deficit, the more likely you're going to lose muscle. And we've all heard about the set point theory that the body tries to get back to its original starting weight after you lose weight. But I think that the set point theory is based on not what the original body weight was, but what the original muscle weight was.
Okay.
So and this, one of the strongest predictors of whether or not you will gain weight back after weight loss is how much muscle you lose. So if you prevent the muscle loss in the first place, that fat loss is much more likely to be permanent.
Gotcha.
So how do you maintain muscle? You increase the protein intake and you weight train.
Yeah. You have to stimulate those muscles.
Yes. Anytime you're in a caloric deficit and anytime you're weight training, the protein needs go higher.
Yeah.
So if you're just following the RDA of 0.8 grams per kilogram, which is already very low for protein, most people probably feel that that's too low.
Yeah.
Then if you're going to add the additional stress of a caloric deficit, and on top of that, add resistance training, you at least need to double that RDA in order to meet those protein needs to prevent that muscle loss. The other thing is you can't be in a very big deficit. Like your deficit should be 200, maybe 300 calories.
Okay.
Right. And in that situation, if all you're looking at is weight on the scale, it's going to be very, very slow.
Well, and I've even had some clients who the scale didn't change a whole lot.
Yeah.
Well, they'll
look like different.
They looked different. Like that's why we do the body measurements for NeoFit 90 because like my sister, for example, didn't know that she was losing weight. She felt better. Visibly, she had lost fat, but the scale didn't change. And she also came to find out she was pregnant again, which was her goal. Yeah. But I was really encouraged because I was like, it's because of the good protein intake that you had. You were replacing that fat with muscle. And she was doing some strength training.
Yeah, she was basically recompositioning. So this is why I always recommend that people get a DEXA scan to measure body composition.
Okay.
So, and the ideal way to do it, I think the way we used to run if you came into the human performance lab at GW and you said, I want to lose weight.
Okay.
We would do two things. We'd measure your body composition with a DEXA scan. That would tell us how much fat you have, which really isn't all that important. But what's more important is how much muscle you have.
Yeah, because the ratio.
Because we would use the muscle to determine what your protein intake was, rather than saying, oh, eat 1 pound per pound of body weight.
Yeah.
Because if you had 100 extra pounds of fat on you, you don't need to feed that fat 100 grams of protein.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's a lot more, there's a lot more range than that. Yeah. I've kind of struggled with that because, and maybe you can explain why this is the case a little bit better than I can, but I'll have guys that they switch to higher quality protein sources, let's say eggs, NeoLife shake, complete amino acids, all of that, from just eating only like steaks and meat, which take a lot more to digest, a lot more work, and they have a lot of fat in them. And they won't have to do the straight a pound per gram of body weight.
Yeah.
They can eat like 75 to 80% of that. They're still getting their protein a lot higher than it was, but they will put on muscle and get stronger pretty quickly and then lose some fat.
Yeah.
Do you think that's because of the quality of the protein? It's able to be used quicker?
I don't know that. That sounds like it's more of you're changing the type of protein so that there's more variation in protein rather than one single. I don't know what the evidence is on that as far as whether or not that causes, what happens in a lab situation and what you hear people tell you are very different.
Yeah.
So I've never heard, like a difference between like beef protein and egg protein. Those are both very, very good sources of protein.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the beef is going to still be the stuff you need for muscle.
Right. So it's hard to.
What about the protein digestibility component? Because like if you're not getting quite as much in the end result after you digest it with something like really fatty meat compared to like, let's say milk or something like that, you know, that can play a role.
I think it can, but I think any animal source protein, like I don't know that the fat in meat, I think more of like what an interrupter in terms of caloric absorption would be something like fiber, for example. Like I know that if you take like 100 calorie apple and 100 calories worth of Oreos.
Yeah.
You're probably, there's evidence that shows you're not really going to absorb as many calories from the apple because the insoluble fiber interferes with it. It interferes with the absorption,
which is going to prevent things like diabetes. Why people get diabetes free.
I haven't heard of like fat in meat preventing protein. I haven't heard anything like that. So I think you're working at the margins. Like those are a minor issue, right? I think worrying about the overall protein intake is far more important.
What sources do you recommend that people get their protein intake from?
Ideally, I think animal protein, which complete protein sources. Yeah. So that can be soy or animal proteins. I don't think it really matters that much. Again, it depends on who you're talking to. Like if you're talking to your typical person who you want to give them realistic goals and targets. You got to understand, like you and I sitting here talking about food is different than just two average people sitting here who don't really understand.
Yeah.
So it's hard enough to tell people, okay, not only do you have to avoid ultra processed foods, but you have to focus on only getting these certain amount of proteins.
Yeah.
It just becomes overwhelming and people are like, I don't want to.
Yeah. That's why I like one of the things we focus on is the quick win. So how can you get something that is convenient, but still healthy, like the NeoLife shake, where they don't really have to think a whole lot about it.
Right. Like take the NeoLife shake, for example. So the NeoLife shake has 140 calories. It's got complete protein in it. It's got 18 grams of protein in it.
You think that's a good amount, or like, would you frequently do like an extra scoop or something?
I mix it with milk.
Okay. So
So I basically take 3 scoops and mix it with about 20 ounces of skim milk.
Okay.
Which gives me about, I think it's like between 45 and 50 grams of protein.
Nice. Okay.
So, let's say you do that, and the other good thing about it is it's got a bunch of fiber in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's satisfying.
It is
satiating, right? So if you were to do that just once, let's say for breakfast, you get up and you drink 3, and I'm saying 3 scoops and 20 ounces of milk, assuming that you need.
Oh no, that'll throw me up for like 4 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to eat less throughout the day.
Yeah.
And that's been shown in studies looking at meal replacement shakes in general, not NeoLife shakes, but just meal replacement shakes in general. And there's a dose response. If you give somebody one meal replacement shake a day and just tell them to drink it at any time and don't control any other aspect of their diet, they're going to eat fewer calories throughout the day.
Because they're thinking this is.
And if you give them 2 shakes per day, they're going to eat even fewer calories throughout the day, and you end up losing weight.
Yeah.
And
like we have that clinical study, and that has the result. And that was like, they did a lot of the other factors people may or may not have like fed really straight with, but they did at least the 2. So they were able to get like an average fat loss.
And, those are the kinds of changes that I think need to happen in today's diet, because you don't feel deprived. They're very easy and convenient to do. So they match sort of like we talk about ultra processed foods. Well, a NeoLife shake is an ultra processed food.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But ultra processed foods they only cause weight gain if they meet 2 criteria.
Okay.
They have to be calorie dense and they have to be hyper palatable. Okay. So if you look at a NeoLife shake, it's not calorie dense. It's only 140 calories and it's not hyper palatable. So hyper palatable is a food that has a certain percentage of a combination of fat and salt, fat and sugar, or carbohydrate and salt.
Okay. And then usually something else like MSG or something.
Okay. Right. Yeah. No, just those 2 ingredients.
Okay.
Right. So that's what makes it.
Yeah.
If it's calorie dense and it has one of those combinations of hyper palatability, you're going to eat more of it. It's going to hijack the brain and you're going to eat more of it. So it's not the processing itself.
Yeah.
You can design a diet that's entirely ultra processed foods, but if they're not hyper palatable and not calorie dense, it won't cause any changes in weight gain. Right. So
it's not like it's not the convenience that's a problem. It's
no,
yeah.
It's just
what's left over after the process.
Right. And it just so happens that the overwhelming majority of ultra processed foods meet those criteria. Yeah. Nutri-dense and hyper, but some of them don't.
Yeah.
So, a NeoLife shake, for example, those things are easy because they meet the convenience factor that ultra processed foods provide. You don't really have to think about it. Mm-hmm. They're fast, and they don't leave you deprived. You don't feel like, I'm still hungry or anything like that. They fill you up, which is the exact opposite of what ultra processed foods do.
Yeah.
Yeah, foods are designed to maximize caloric intake and not really satisfy you.
Yeah. And the processing is done not for like the end result of the flavor, but it's actually for the nutrient maximization. Right. Yeah. Not to destroy it.
Right. Yeah. So it's like the processing of a Dorito, for example.
Yeah.
That's processed in a way and engineered. It's actually engineered in a way to hijack your reward system in your brain so that you can't stop eating.
Yeah, there's a really interesting mini documentary I saw recently. It was like it traced the guys who went from when cigarettes were just straight tobacco, which some of the people in the blue zones smoke, which is kind of wild. And I think there's the correlation there to the high antioxidant intake that they have. Yeah. And they're not sedentary.
Right.
But then when they started adding all of those other ingredients, then that got found out. It was like, blame it all on the nicotine. And then they jump over into the food industry and they engineer these foods like Doritos and the amount of companies that these guys work for. It was crazy.
Well, it's interesting because I can't remember that. I don't want to get this wrong. It might have been like in the early 90s. Tobacco manufacturers got involved in the food industry.
Yeah.
And these big tobacco conglomerates ended up buying these massive food industry, these food.
With all the money they had made.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, the foods that these companies engineered were far more addictive and hyper palatable than the food companies that weren't owned by the tobacco.
So they knew how to make things addictive.
They sort of planned to make foods addictive. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's funny because at the time they had paid doctors to say, John Miller has a great presentation where he's like, look at all them saying like they're sitting there smoking. The doctor's office saying this.
Oh yeah.
Then they were saying sugar and everything's great. And even today you had pushback really like until RFK started changing things. Remember like not that long ago, you had pushback them saying, well, like exercise doesn't matter. You're just essentially a victim of like being fat. And then like, it doesn't matter the processed foods you're having. And like she was just mentioning the Canadian health minister who's what like body composition is not what you want.
Right.
And just saying like, it doesn't matter. These foods, like it's not the problem with the ultra processed addictive foods when it's like, this is what everybody's doing.
It's a semantic argument. Yeah. Like she's saying, well, no, it boils down to how many calories you're eating versus how many calories. And she's right. but the food is engineered so that you can't not overeat.
You know what eating those foods primarily is eating just a little bit.
Yeah, right. So, those are loopholes. And she's probably getting, if it's like the United States, which it is, she's getting an enormous amount of influence from the food industry. The food industry lobby in the United States is obscene. The amount of money they spend to be able to control. I mean, a perfect example is if you plot obesity rates from like 1950 on, they're relatively stable until you hit 1980. And in between 1980 and 2000, they just like skyrocket. Like daily intake increases by like 400 calories.
That is nice.
And
meanwhile, the activity goes the opposite.
Yeah, the opposite goes the opposite way. But the thing that happened in 1980 that's significant is that's the first year that the government published dietary guidelines. It was in 1980.
The government knows what to do. We get
right. And the government, it was Health and Human Services. Got together with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and they said, okay, saturated fats are causing heart disease. We have to put out these dietary guidelines that focus on basically carbohydrates, minimizing fat.
And then the industry responds and makes everything fat.
So sugar-free. Right. Yeah. So the industry responds and takes all these things that normally had fat in them, removes the fat. Well, now if you remove fat, they don't taste good anymore.
Yeah.
So you have to add back sugar. Now, it's not the sugar itself. The problem was the low-fat versions were more calorically dense than the full-fat versions. Mm-hmm. So there were actually...
Yeah, because when you eat fat, it doesn't just convert to fat, but when you excess carbohydrates...
Well, excess carbohydrates will still convert to fat, but basically they were making cookies that had 100 calories and now they have 125 calories. So, and then the psychological effect is, well, the government just told me that carbs are fine and fat's bad. This doesn't have any fat. I can eat more of them.
Yeah.
So they're eating more of them, plus they're more calorically dense than the full fat version. And as a result, you widen the intake and energy gap.
Well, it's interesting. We've kind of come full circle. The extreme response to that now is that carbs are all bad.
Yeah.
But it's like, this is the thing that literally my body is wired to crave.
Yeah.
And that's not like that's not an inherent flaw.
No. And there's a researcher at NIH named Kevin Hall, and he's one of probably the most well-known currently obesity researcher ever. But he basically studies, first he got involved with the carbs, low carb versus low fat type diets to sort of oppose the ketogenic argument that carbohydrates and insulin are the things that's making you fat. So he did a study where he took two groups and he gave one of them a low carb diet, and then one of them your typical low fat diet.
Yeah.
But the calories were matched and the protein was matched. So the only thing that was different was the percentage of fat, the percentage of carbs. When those individuals ate those diets, there was absolutely no difference between the two groups in the amount.
Oh, wow.
It all boiled down to how big was the calorie deficit.
Huh.
It boiled down to the size of the caloric deficit.
Okay.
So,
because the body can adapt to either of them.
Yeah, I mean, a body normally adapts to either one.
That's what metabolic ability, which your body.
Yeah, the protein. Right. Yeah, but if you're eating enough carbohydrate, your body won't convert to protein.
Yeah.
Glucose. So, that was really the first study that sort of demonstrated that no, it's not carbohydrates and it's not insulin. It still boils down to are you in a deficit or are you in a surplus?
Yeah.
So all of these diets like keto, carnivore, any dieting strategy is a hack to try and compensate for the surplus, the caloric surplus that you're in.
Which is so, because most of human history, the problem was a caloric deficit.
Right.
Like they were trying to not be in a caloric deficit.
Right.
Yeah.
Like none of these diets make you lose fat by putting you in a caloric surplus. Yeah. Right. It just doesn't work. So they're all just different ways to create the deficit, which leads you to believe that, well, if any diet of any food composition can cause me to lose weight, if it creates a deficit, then it's not the composition of the food that's causing the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
We, one of the things that's interesting too, is when people just start eating more real food. And I think this goes back to what you're talking about, like with engineering physical activity into what you're doing. When you have to cook things from scratch, when you have to make them, and when that's like a couple meals a day, sitting down together, eating a whole meal, there's this whole process where it's taking time and energy to do that.
It absolutely is.
So you eat it slower, you think about it more. And when you're eating those like real foods, then people just don't eat as much.
No.
Like they can't, because it's got all this fiber, it's got all this protein, it's very satiating.
Yeah.
The flavor, that's the thing too. It's like the flavor is so much better.
Yep.
When you go get a tomato out of your garden, or you pick some grapes versus something that's hyper processed.
Yeah.
It tastes way.
Yeah. And it's another study that Kevin Hall did when he took 20 people and brought them in, and his lab is basically a hospital floor at NIH. They stay there. They live there.
Wow. It's good to hear NIH is doing some good stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a different argument, but yeah. NIH, chronic disease, the diet-related diseases are the number one cause of death in the United States. NIH spends 1.3% of their budget on studying nutrition and disease.
Oh my goodness.
1.3%.
That's so easy. Yeah.
But he took 20 people and brought them in, and he gave them 2 different diets. One that was all ultra-processed foods.
Okay.
And one that was minimally processed foods. But they were the same caloric content, the same carbohydrates, same protein, and same fat, same sodium and same fiber. Basically, everything was the same. So he'd bring them in.
All the macros are the same.
All the macros are the same. The only difference is whether it's ultra processed or not. So, and the size of the plates were huge. There was like 2,000 calories on the plate. And they said, just eat as much as you want.
Yeah.
And he said, and what we're studying is how these diets affect like lipid markers or something like that, when they really weren't studying lipid markers at all. They didn't want the people to know what they were actually studying.
Okay. Because then they might choose what. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because then they would alter their eating behavior. So they sat down and they ate the meals. And so the 20 people first would eat for 2 weeks. They would eat the ultra processed diet. And then then they'd go home for a few days. Then they'd come back. And then for 2 weeks, they'd eat the unprocessed diet. And they lived there. So they said, just eat as much as you want. And what they found was that when the people ate, so what happened was they'd eat as much as they want. Then they would take the food and they would measure everything that was on the plate. You know, how many calories did they eat? You know, basically they wanted to know what was the difference between what they sat down and what they took back. And that's determined how much they ingested.
Yeah.
So when they were on the ultra processed diet, they ate on average 500 more calories a day.
Whoa.
On the ultra processed.
You know, the engineering of the food that you're going to eat.
Right. You're going to eat more. So even though the macronutrient distribution is exactly the same. So you can't really say, well, ultra processed foods have more carbs and that's why you eat them. No, it's not true, because they ate about 250 more calories of carbs and about 250 more calories of fat.
Wow.
Okay. But when they were asked which meals did they like better, there was no difference. They said they enjoyed both of them equally.
Wow.
So you don't need to necessarily eat ultra processed foods to enjoy your food. Like you can eat minimally processed foods and like it just as much as you do the ultra processed food.
That's wild.
But yeah. So that's
why the marketing and the packaging and food, everything is it's so much money. I was reading something like the budget of just marketing for the packaging to get people to buy the food is a significant portion of what you're paying for.
Oh yeah.
You know,
it's enormous. It's huge. It's huge. And the food manufacturers get tax breaks on those, the tax incentives on marketing.
That's crazy.
So there are a lot of things in the government that are set up. Like when Kevin Hall came out with that paper, that one looking at the processed versus the unprocessed food, people at NIH tried to close his lab.
That is wild.
And he was able to keep the lab open because he lobbied some very high up people to keep it open. But all of a sudden, studies got much more difficult to do. Money to come in to do his studies got much
because it's not gonna promote. It's bad for the food industry. Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. Yeah. Give me 1 second. Let me make sure it's still okay. We're still going. Yeah. So you have a presentation that you've done while you're up here. I want to just get you some other time we could do it remotely and have you do it for our group, just talking about the conflicts of interest, which people are aware of now. We're waking up to. I'm really glad that there's some changes going on. Like I got to meet in person and talk to several times the guy who's the new director of the NIH, which is a complete flip from Fauci. And he did a lot of on the ground studies at Stanford, a really great guy. And he's talked, I actually asked him questions specifically about chronic disease when he was doing some meetings up here in Idaho. And my questions were, considering how many people are dying from this, and yet we had something that, according to your studies, affected way less percentage of the population than they originally had looked at. Like the infection rate and all that. He proved that it was way higher. So therefore the mortality rate was way down. And his whole point was economically, because he's got a doctorate in economics and he's a medical doctor. And his whole point was economically, we harmed way more of the population for the sake of a certain part of the population that would have been the most effective, that we could have cared for had we understood that the disease risk for them was greater. But when we looked at all the other factors of chronic disease and how they played into people's risk of infectious disease, he said just that alone, how much chronic disease risk increases your risk of effect. He said that warrants much more focus on chronic disease.
Yeah. But to do that, you'd have to focus on food.
Yeah. Right.
And that's where the food lobby comes in and they're like, nope.
Yeah. Yep.
People don't understand. I don't think people really realize the influence that the food industry has, because one of the other things that's sort of hidden in the background is, and there are firms, lobbying firms. There's lots of lobbying firms in DC. Yeah, inside the Beltway, there's lobbying firms.
That's your home turf.
That's my home turf. So you have to understand that in the background of chronic disease is treatment of chronic disease.
Right,
and that's big money.
Oh, huge.
If you look at, the top selling drug in the United States is basically Lipitor. They're statins for high cholesterol, blood pressure, diabetes.
Have you ever read the book Lipitor Thief of Memory by the NASA astronaut?
No, I haven't.
Mind-blowing book. Like he linked dementia to because you cut off your cholesterol to be able to transport. Yeah.
So the thing is, the pharmaceutical companies, certain pharmaceutical companies, depending on what drugs you make, have become enormously wealthy off chronic disease, right? So not only do you have the food, and I know that there are firms in DC, lobbying firms that represent both the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry at the same time, because what's good for the food industry is good for the drug industry, right? Yeah. So I think what happens, and I don't really know, I'm not an expert on this by any stretch, but it doesn't, you don't need to be one to sort of see these connections, right? So I think that if you have the food industry dumping all this money into protecting the food industry, it makes sense that you would have drug companies dumping money in to protect the food industry as well.
Yeah.
Because that's their feeder program.
Yeah.
Right? So if you think about the combined wealth of the food industry, I think globally, this past year, I think the global food industry, it was something like, it was more than the oil and gas industry.
Oh yeah.
It was like $9 trillion or something like that. So, if you take that power and the purchasing power behind the pharmaceutical companies and combine them,
it's almost unassailable.
Yeah. You're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I am excited that there's a shift in thinking from the top. Like everyone is we've been focusing on grassroots for so long, and that's still going to be the key, because where the market demand is, that's what's really going to drive a lot of this.
Yeah. And I think eventually you get to a point where the government can't ignore it anymore, because that's what happened with the tobacco industries. So like for many years, there was this, we knew that tobacco smoking caused lung cancer, but sort of the molecular link, the link at the cellular level was never really established. And then somebody published a paper. I can't remember. I don't remember the details, but somebody published a paper that basically produced the causal link between smoking and causing cancer at the cellular level. It was like, you couldn't really deny it anymore. And after that, that's when, cigarettes went from $2 a pack to $13 a pack.
Yeah.
Because it's just that they're just so heavily taxed.
Yeah.
Right. And it was the government that basically couldn't really deny the evidence anymore. And now they impose all these taxes, and that now nobody smokes anymore, basically. It's just made it economically not feasible to smoke. Very few people smoke. And I think when you think about, okay, well, we know that cigarettes cause cancer. Well, I think Hall's study on ultra processed foods showing that you're going to eat 500 calories.
Yeah, so they're causing obesity.
That's the cause. I think that's the causal link. So
which is why you were mentioning that they tried to get him shut down.
They tried to make it
right, because you're licking these foods too.
Yeah. So then the next step then is to say, okay, and I'm not really a big fan of sin taxes, but if you treat it the same way as you do cigarettes, why not? make soda.
Yeah, my thing has always been, I would love it if the government would just get out of, telling us like what we can and can't eat, and making it so that it's just as easy for the local farmer as it is for these giant food companies. Right. It's convenient, but they have to pay all this extra money to get organic certified and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, right.
It makes it so difficult.
It makes it very difficult.
If they're there and they're spending, billions and billions of our dollars to do it, trillions, in fact, and if they're involved in our healthcare, then I would like it to be doing the right things.
Yeah.
It's going to be spent. So
yeah. I mean, just think if you went into a grocery store, which is 70% ultra processed, the calories in the grocery store, 70% are ultra processed.
Yeah.
Now think it, and why can I buy, I don't know, why can I buy, like a Coke for $1, but I had to spend $9 to buy 3 apples. Right. You know what I mean? It's crazy. So if you flip that, where you go in the bizarro grocery store where all the unprocessed stuff makes up about 70% of the calories.
Yeah, well, John Miller pointed out a while back that when you go and buy something on the dollar menu at McDonald's, it didn't actually cost $1. It cost 10. The government just subsidized 9.
Yeah, that's probably weird.
And they're not $1 anymore. Either.
Right.
But yeah, like all of those industries that make those hyper processed things are all being subsidized and subsidized by the government.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, just look at corn.
Yeah,
high fructose corn syrup. And I think those corn subsidies started way back, like before World War II, to make food easy to manufacture.
If we didn't have those, then it wouldn't be so prevalent.
Right, it wouldn't be so prevalent.
It wouldn't be cheaper than sugar.
No. And why can I go into a grocery store and spend the same money? Like, I can buy a Coke for $1, but a bottle of Dasani water is also $1.
Yeah.
Like think about that.
Maybe by the same company too.
Yeah, they'd be by the same company. So, and like when they're in that Coke plant somewhere, there's just bottles coming by that have a different label on it.
Yeah.
It's just water down and then going to ship it all somewhere else.
This one's blue. This one's white. This one has all these other ingredients, but it's
crazy. It's crazy. So I think really there, I guess what I'm getting at is there are many things that the government can do from sort of a taxation standpoint, just like they did with cigarettes. Because it's very clear that our diet is killing us. Yeah. It's very clear.
Yeah. Or I think one of the big solutions is just stop subsidizing. Like this is one of the big initiatives of HHS right now is getting the food and nutrition programs like WIC,
SNAP,
SNAP to, why is it? And me and my wife, we even looked at this because we qualified and we looked like what's available and stuff. And it's like, you can do minimal, you can't buy any meat.
Right.
No meat. It's like milk and yogurt are your only protein sources. And then it's
you could buy soda.
Yeah, you could buy soda. You can buy crackers. You can buy cookies. You all this other trash. And it's like, that's not helping. Like, that's not what we eat, Eggs, you can only get you can have enough for 1 egg per child a day or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So they're getting, and several states have done it already. Idaho, Texas jumped on it right away. Yeah. And then those states at the state level are also making it so that companies that have dyes and other things in their foods that shouldn't be in there, who sell those same things in Europe and they have laws against them, they're basically banning those foods as well.
Well, that happened too. There was, I think it was General Mills. I think it was Trix or Fruit Loops. They tried to take out a bunch of the dyes.
Yeah.
And they did it voluntarily. They weren't mandated to do it. And then their customer base just went absolutely ballistic. Because they were like, bring it back. Right. Yeah. Right. So they had to bring it back. But if the government said everybody has to take them out, then it wouldn't be a big deal.
You wouldn't go get the knockoff.
Yeah. It wouldn't matter. So even if a food manufacturer wants to do the right thing, if everybody doesn't do it, it's not going to make a difference.
Totally. Has to be massive.
You're totally right that I think, it doesn't make any sense that these massive food conglomerates get all these subsidies, but local farms basically get nothing. I mean, it makes it financially, it's a financial disincentive for you to eat locally grown food as opposed to going in and just buying crap in the grocery.
It's why there's a handful of companies that control the vast majority of the whole grain industry, all of the meat industry. It's like Tyson Foods or something like
ConAgra, Ardrey, Midland.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So let me bring that to kind of the conclusion here with some of the things that you're excited about, the things that we both implement with using whole food concentrates and supplements and things like that. So we're bringing in that convenience angle. We both work with NeoLife. That's how we know each other. This is a family-owned company who has regenerative farms around the world where they get their good quality ingredients from, and they're really just in the pursuit of how can we nutritionally maximize these things in a different form that's convenient, that's affordable, that people aren't getting in their diets in general. So what are some of your things that you've been sipping on your Elevate all morning? That's probably my favorite product, just because of the I think that the many different benefits it has, but it's also convenient. It's like I don't have to reach for something else. But what are some of the things that you like to use on a daily basis personally, and that you would recommend people get started with? And then what are some of the things that you're excited about in this modern time where we have the technology to be able to keep the nutrition and then give people convenient alternatives? Because the supplement industry is also, obviously massive, and there's a lot of fraud there too. So
Yeah, there is. But I do think that supplementation in general, regardless of what your diet is, I think supplementation in general is a good idea.
And everybody's doing it these days.
Yeah. And I think people recognize that. They recognize that. So my personal products, I like Pro Vitality. I think that gives you the most bang for the buck in terms of what it's providing for you nutritionally.
And 3 things in there are healthy fats. They're not even vitamins or minerals.
Right. And NeoLife shakes. Those are things. The shakes, I think, are probably the things that have the greatest direct translation to improving your diet. Because
it's actually a meal.
It's a meal that provides you with protein and fiber and things that are going to help you not eat so much throughout the rest of the day. That's really that's where you get the bang for the buck.
Yeah. And then a few of us, like me and Joe, even have kind of done some research at a few different meetings, like, okay, to try to get the amount of nutrients that's in here, the amount of complete protein,
right.
Like let's say, what is never get raw milk. We would have to eat so many different things. And then if we go get the raw milk from the neighbor, it's actually costing us almost as much, if not more.
Yeah.
And you still have the saturated fats and the sugars that an adult doesn't really need.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And because that's the problem we're in. We're in a world where our food is becoming increasingly more calorically dense. It's becoming increasingly less nutrient dense. And we're more sedentary than we've ever been. So we need to get as much nutrition as we possibly can.
Yeah.
In as little calories as we can.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And that becomes very difficult to do.
So you have to being process something to do that.
Right. Yeah. So, if I can drink a shake that has a high protein content and a high fiber content.
If that blew to you, okay, I would go ride my bicycle for like 30, 40 miles and come back, and I would have a NeoLife shake, and I would be fine for like an hour. And I just burned, 1,500 calories. But I'm immediately replacing the things that my body wanted right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even though you burn 1,500 calories, your body can take that from fat.
Yeah.
Provided that you're giving your stored body fat.
Which I usually would be in my other.
Yeah, provided you're replacing the glycogen and everything that's being burned, that is going to not make your body think that you're in that state of deprivation.
Yeah.
So
you the NeoLife shake. I've always thought too that has the biggest potential to shift really the health of the country, and it's what I've seen. They get level too. We'll see really great results on the metabolic level. With cardiovascular things like that, or even hormones with the Pro Vitality. But then when people start changing their protein intake and shifting out a meal that normally they would, if they're trying to get that much protein, they'd be consuming a lot more calories.
Right.
And then they switch out. Plus the convenience, it's like, It's just there. You can grab it. Then you're not going to go buy something that's convenient, which is going to end up being, 10 times as many calories.
I think you get the primary effect of the shake, the contents of the shake. But then you get the secondary effect of you're not going to eat as much of other stuff throughout the day.
Right.
Whereas if you just took Pro Vitality, you'd get the benefit of the Pro Vitality, but it's probably not going to decrease what your appetite.
No, because you still need to eat food.
You're still going to need to eat, right?
Yeah.
So I think that if I had to pick one for people, I would say the shake.
Yeah. And it's got a lot of vitamins and minerals in it.
Yeah.
How does it, so you've been around in the fitness world a long time. You've been at other nutrition companies. How do you think it compares to other things on the market as far as the quality?
From a quality perspective, I don't think there's anything better on the market in terms of the manufacture of it and the sourcing and things like that. That's just the way NeoLife is.
Yeah.
All of their products are like that. And I have worked with other companies where they're not necessarily bad, but they don't take extra steps that they don't have to take in order to ensure the quality. NeoLife takes a lot of extra steps.
Yeah. They're really focused on that nutrient density.
Yeah, they really are. And the quality. Yeah. And our chief science officer, Susan Beck, she's a she does a lot that she doesn't have to do in terms of sourcing. She wants to know exactly where things are coming from. She wants to track them through the entire production chain.
Yeah, most of the companies don't even think about that. Like I told people that all the time, okay, company's going to tell you take our zinc, whatever, because look at all these studies that show men need zinc. Yeah, we're us marketing. But then what I want to know is, okay, am I absorbing that? Is that from a good source? Does it have like other contaminants in it to where it's going to do that? Like, but I actually know 100% that it's going to do those things, going to give me those benefits, but it's also not going to harm me in the process, right? Because you've probably seen some of the studies that have come out and shown that whether it's plant-based or even like collagen proteins, that they're loaded with heavy metals and all these other things. And so there's a huge demand for supplements in the supplement market, but you really want to know the company and the steps that they take.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of that are things that they don't have to reveal. And it's not that supplements aren't regulated, but the FDA just doesn't have the resources to like go to every supplement manufacturer and go on their lines and see what's happening in terms of what's going actually in the bottom.
Yeah, and we found that when some companies like Garden of Life, for example, they were bought by Nestle, and then all of a sudden that when they were doing studies on the product and the nutrient quality, all that stuff wasn't there, and you're like, why would I be surprised?
Yeah, it's no surprise.
Same company that's
no surprise. And you know, if you're a food manufacturer, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders to maximize your bottom line.
Yeah.
And if you can,
which means you're always increasing.
Yeah.
No matter what the cost.
Right. And if you can legally cut corners, you're going to do that. That's your job, is to do that. You know, your job is not to make a process more expensive than it needs to be and cut the bottom line.
Yeah.
So NeoLife though says, well, we're going to do things that we don't necessarily have to do to ensure that our products are better.
And they don't have shareholders. They work with shareholders, business partners, right? Then yeah,
that's right. So, and like, you know, when I got involved with NeoLife, they were basically, the way NeoLife operates is the scientific advisory board thinks of new products, and then we work together to formulate that product, and then we give it to the company, and then the company's job is to market that product.
Yeah.
I've worked with other companies where marketing will come up with a product.
Yeah. This is what everybody wants.
Says this is what everybody wants.
Everybody wants collagen protein. You got to make it. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, I never really lasted long at those kinds of places because it's not science driven. It's not evidence driven. It's driven by the market. And
I think that's something that you mentioned at your first summit. It's something that I loved talking to Liz Applegate about too, is that the difference is like, you know, especially being a professor in the world, you're teaching students all this theory, you're giving them this information. And I remember her saying that, you know, I'm excited to be at a place where we're actually giving the average person the tool to implement the theory that we're giving them. Because I can teach these college students something, but they're still going to go eat top ramen.
Yeah.
You know, or like in I think one of the things that you said is, you know, like the way that the university, the study, all of that world works is constantly doing new studies and information. And it's like, okay, what would really change is if we implemented the results.
And we've read that study. Right.
But instead, it's let's get on to the next thing, because the scientists who are doing those universities have to get money.
They do.
So where are they going to get money if they're not this never any prescribed research?
Right. Like, yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things that really has frustrated me with academia is that, you know, we write these papers that nobody's really going to read, but we write these papers so that we can justify getting more grant money for the university so that we can just perpetuate that cycle.
Right.
Right. When like, we don't need to do more research to show that exercise is good for you.
Yeah.
Like that's,
we need to get people.
we need to do research, figure out how do you get people to exercise.
I don't need to do more research on whether you need to eat hyper-processed real foods. Let's just eat more real foods.
Right. Yeah.
Which is something cool too that NeoLife is incentivizing, right? They're incentivizing us to help our customers do it. We've got the NeoFit 90 program, which is, hey, if you get these results, you can win prizes.
Yeah.
And then just rewarding people who are doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think NeoLife does a lot of good things that other companies just don't do, that they don't have to do. So
going above and beyond. Yeah. What's your favorite thing about the Elevate? Because I know that product came on board around the same time as you did. And it really in my view, it filled a huge gap in the market with healthy energy drinks.
Yeah. I mean, that's my favorite thing about it, is because I've always I like energy drinks. I shouldn't say that. I have a love-hate relationship with energy drinks because I want to have something. I like caffeine.
Yeah.
I like the nootropics that are in Elevate. But I don't want to go in and buy a Monster or a Rockstar or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't know what's in them.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of them are like these proprietary energy blends.
You want to know a funny story? I knew a guy who was like one of the top managers at Coca-Cola who makes Monster. and he was inspecting a warehouse. I think it was up in this area one time. And he said one of their pallets of their Monster Energy drinks, something got damaged and a bunch of them were leaking, and it ate like a hole in the concrete floor to where the whole thing just like fell over. And he said what blew him away is he saw that. He was like, what on earth is in these things?
Yeah.
And so what the company did is he expected, they're going to go like look at that and see if there's anything wrong with that batch. No, he said what they actually did was they came in, they fixed the concrete, and then they went and worked with an aerospace company and found out what they used to coat space shuttles to protect them from re-entering the atmosphere. And they used a similar ingredient in that coating, and they had all of their warehouses, the floors, coated with those,
right,
instead of changing the ingredients
right.
in the Monster.
Yeah.
And he was like, when I saw that visibly, I knew that I should never drink that.
Yeah.
Because what is that doing inside of my body?
Oh, I know. And you know, people think that like any food that's manufactured, any drink that's manufactured, like all the ingredients there have to be vetted through the FDA.
Right. Yeah. Everything you read on the can is there.
No.
Yeah.
No. You know, there's, do you know what the GRAS thing is, the generally recognized?
Oh, SA. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that process is basically, you know, it's got a relatively long history, but basically what it is that the FDA says that things are generally recognized as safe so that they don't have to go through some really long, huge process that delays the manufacture of foods. But
yeah.
It's up to the manufacturer
to tell us
to make the determination as to whether it's generally recognized.
It's like that GMOs. Who is giving this research that are good? The safe custodies.
Yeah. So the manufacturer can put anything in it and say, well, yeah, we've done the research and we've determined it's generally recognized as safe. And the FDA is like, all right.
Yeah. We'll take your word for it.
So yeah, I mean, and it's actually a fascinating history if you read about, what used to go in. Like people think foods back in like 1900 were all like, didn't have any chemicals in them or anything like that, but they had
as soon as we could.
Yeah. As soon as we could, as soon as you could figure out that how do you preserve things?
Yeah.
I think that's what what was that book by Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, was about the meat packing industry.
Yeah. Well, even like I remember, there was a guy who did a huge study, Jim McPhee's on the Health Practitioners for Council for NeoLife. He brought it up, and they found that, like, the first mass manufacturing of MREs was for World War I, and we sent our troops over there, which is kind of later in the war. And the American troops didn't see as much combat as all the European troops, but there was like massive outbreaks, and they basically, anybody that had any stomach issues, nausea issues, they said it was influenza. So it was like all influenza, we're going to blame on it. But they found that a majority of it was from these guys. All of a sudden, you know, they're all coming from farms, they eat whole foods, they're eating these hyper processed foods, and they were having issues with the gluten in them, and they were having essentially celiac symptoms. Yeah. And it was like, it's all influenza. These guys were throwing up, not keeping any liquids down. And more of our troops died from eating hyper-processed foods than they did from combat.
Yeah, I totally believe that. I could definitely see how that could happen.
Yeah, and I in the supplement industry, there's like the USP certification, right? I've seen that people will kind of brag about that. That came about since I've been in with NeoLife. And I remember going and researching like what exactly all does this entail? And it's basically nothing. The companies can buy it, get the stamp. There's a couple things they have to throw there, but they don't have to prove there's no heavy metals in their product. They don't have to prove that the nutrients are bioavailable. They don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. It's basically just like, is your packaging facility somewhat sterile?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of blew my mind. And like, that's not the same. So like NeoLife has a pharmaceutical license, which means like if there was going to be an audit and what was active ingredients on the label wasn't in the product, could get in trouble.
Yeah. So like the pharmaceutical license, their manufacturing process in California, for example, there's a pharmacist that actually is on staff in that facility.
Oh, wow.
So they're most supplements, any supplement that's manufactured has to follow what's called good manufacturing process. Yeah, supplements, GMPs for supplements, but there's also one called GMP for pharmaceuticals. So we use the GMP for pharmaceutical standard, which is voluntary.
Yeah.
You don't have to, but if you do decide that's the one you're going to use, then you need to have a pharmacist in the facility, which we do.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's something, just think about that in and of itself. If you were a supplement company that was publicly traded or something like that, EAS, or I don't know who, I think Abbott bought EAS, but, would you hire a pharmacist if you didn't have to?
No,
you wouldn't do that.
No,
you wouldn't do that. So, you know, these massive supplement companies that just sell just huge amounts of volume, you have to ask yourself, you know, are they really voluntarily doing things to maximize the quality of their product if they don't really have to, you know?
Yeah. No, they're a money making company first. Whereas I mean, even the way that NeoLife does the business with working with guys like me on the ground versus just putting all the money into like, you know, good video marketing or something like that, which that's become necessary in the time that we live in, is really encouraging to me because they're thinking about the long term. That's another big difference that really has kept me with them for so long, is knowing that they're a family owned company and that they're thinking about how can we like help Cameron and then his kids and then their kids be healthy. Whereas it seems to me that the rest of the food and supplement and in the drug industry for sure is like, how can I milk my customer?
No, it's how can I keep the population sick?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, you're killing your customer actually, like you're killing long term, but that doesn't matter for short term profits because it's the CEOs or shareholders right now that are getting that. They're not thinking, you know, their children.
Yeah, and if I think that if I'm a CEO of a pharmaceutical industry, a company, I want to get a customer as young as I possibly can. I want to get them on as many drugs as possible, and I want to make them live as long as I possibly can. Right. So
there's a lot of science that's going into it.
Right. Yeah. Right. But that is exactly the system we've set up, especially with Gen Z, because now we have kids who are developing adult onset diabetes at an alarming rate, which never happened before.
Right.
Gen Z is the first generation that's predicted to not live as long as their parents.
That is crazy.
Right. And that's 2025.
Yeah.
I mean, can you believe we're even talking about that?
I know it is nuts. And we're so advanced.
It's because of what we eat and what we don't do. It's our lack of activity and the food we put in our bodies. That's what it boils down to. So those kids, like you take a drug like Ozempic, Wegovy, semaglutide, and the GLP-1s. I think those are approved for kids as young as 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if I have a kid who's obese at 12, and I have him on a GLP-1, or let's say he's obese, a kid's obese, and now you have him on blood pressure medication or something, the kid's more likely to be depressed, more likely to have anxiety.
And you got to get them on the rates of a young man on SSRIs.
And women is even higher.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's real. I think that's that's how the way the system is intended to work.
Yeah.
Because our lifespan, if we look at sickness in the United States, if we took the top 30 wealthiest countries in the world, we fall at about number 27 in terms of health.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's crazy.
We're one of the sickest countries in the world.
Yeah.
And, but our lifespan isn't any shorter.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, because if you're drug,
so what are we getting for that leg?
If you're in the drug industry, you don't want people to die of disease. You want them to treat them as long as possible. You want them to live. You don't care about what their quality of life is like.
Right. Yeah.
You just care about.
Most people that retire, their quality of life is poor because of their health.
Right.
Yeah.
By early 60s.
Yeah. And it's bankrupting us. We can go through all the different problems of things that are, you know, causing us, but poor health is bankrupting our country.
Yeah.
And it's just
it really is. It really is.
Yeah. Well, we're really on a mission to fix that. And I think some of the things we talked about today is, you know, taking Gen Z, for example, I'm really encouraged by so many of the young men that we're working with who are just like, they see this, and they're like, if I don't make a change, I won't have a future. Yeah. I'll be sicker. And then, you know, I'm not going to get the same care because the system is going bankrupt. I'm not going to get the same level of care for everything. So I have to voluntarily do hard things that are going to give me different outcomes.
Yeah.
But one of the encouraging things about that is the reward. You know, it's the reward of when you do something hard, when you go and lift weights in the gym. I just love how I feel afterwards.
Yeah.
Or when I complete a triathlon.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing compared to that feeling of I just did this thing that, like, while I was doing it, I did not think it was physically capable. And then the next time I'm going to go back and do it, like you are saying, my body has now done to make it even better. So you can always keep going. Like the ceiling is not there.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's going to be some ceiling at how much I can overhead press or whatever. But I have a ways to go to reach that. And it's something you can pursue for a long time. And the same thing with nutrition. You know, we're so wired to think aesthetically, where it's all about a diet, like everything restriction. It's like, you know, what in that study you pointed out, he gave people and just said, hey, eat whatever, and they're eating the whole foods, and like they didn't have any less enjoyment, and they got better results on the other end run. So
it's like 500 calorie blend.
Yeah. I mean, it would be hard to have too many NeoLife shakes in a day, or too much Elevate. Cause what is Elevate like 60 calories, or like, I don't even think it's, I don't know. Yeah, it is. It's I'll drink that 2-3 times a day, and there's no side effects.
Yeah.
So there are really good things that people can do that can pay those dividends. And actually you can hack your brain the other way to where the things that you're doing that are giving you dopamine are actually good for you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, cause that's the system is there for a reason. It's designed, and it's not designed to kill us.
Right.
We've just become enslaved to the wrong things.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And it's been engineered that way.
Yeah.
Our food environment has been engineered that way. So I think that people need to understand that people have always been sent the message that if you're obese or if you're overweight, it's a question of willpower. You're just not making the right choices, or there's something wrong with you. You know, that is not the case. The system is rigged against you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You are obese because the system is designed to make you obese.
Yeah.
And they spend awful lot of money doing studies, psychological studies, brain studies, to try and figure out how to hijack that reward system, how to force you to eat more food than you really need. You know, it's all calculated.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So it's not as simple as just saying it's your fault. You just need to eat less and move more. That does not work.
Well, this is a lot of young guys. There's also a big movement now to get away from the addiction to social media, and also particularly pornography, because the reward, how it hacks the brain, and the reward stimulus is just so out of control that really it is something that's very difficult to break that cycle.
Right.
And so you have to set up intentional things, and it's designed that way. It's so easy to capture people.
Yeah. And that's what I was sort of alludes to what I was getting at earlier about. I think food, we've kind of sort of maxed how bad it's ever.
Yeah.
That technology, I think we've just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
With AI, I think.
Oh man. Yeah.
I think, you know, it's going to get to the point where you're well, did you ever see the movie Surrogates?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be that where you're just laying there.
Yeah.
Then you got these goggles on your head. You're just
Yeah.
bloated and obese, and you're just living a life.
Or like Wally.
Yeah, Wally's another perfect example.
Cycle food.
Yeah. Wally's a great example. You're just floating around on this little hover thing, and you're all bloated. Yeah, and you don't have to do anything. I mean, we're not far from that.
No. And then the thing that encourages me is, like, if we can, what we're doing, what you and I are doing, the field that we're in, it's going to be an increasingly high demand as people get sicker and are looking for answers. But really, the answers aren't that complex, right? You know, if you're trying to change your body composition, do some strength training, eat good quality protein, and track your food.
Yeah.
And like start doing those smaller hacks. Get more to walk more during the day.
Yeah. No, I mean the answer is simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. But nothing good is easy, right?
No.
Yeah.
Nothing worth it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure. Hope to share with other people. So,
all right.